In 2024, IAG paid €50 million for nothing. Lufthansa walked away empty-handed. Air France-KLM never even got close. 3 of Europe's biggest airline groups, 1 target airline, 0 deals. Then Turkish Airlines showed up, offered less money, asked for less control, and somehow got everything the others couldn't. This isn't a story about an airline buying a stake in another airline. It's about how you win a game that everyone else was playing wrong. Let's start with why everyone wanted Air Europa in the first place. Because it wasn't the size of the airline. Air Europa wasn't a giant. It carried roughly 12 million passengers a year. Its fleet was modest. Its finances, especially after the pandemic, were a mess, although it did return to profit in 2023 to 24. But none of that mattered. What mattered was where it sat, physically. Air Europa's home base is Madrid-Barajas Airport. And Madrid, for anyone moving people between Europe and Latin America, is the single most strategically important piece of real estate in aviation. It's not just a hub, it's the bridge. The crossing point between 2 continents that share a language, deep cultural ties, and explosive travel demand. Air Europa had built one of the strongest route networks linking Spain with Latin America, serving destinations across Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Mexico, Paraguay, Peru, Uruguay, and Venezuela. More than just a route map, that's practically a whole continent on a platter. Madrid held enormous potential as a European hub, but it had actually been losing ground relative to rivals. In terms of passenger traffic served, it ranked 19th among Europe's 20 largest airports. Whoever fixed that problem by adding Air Europa's Latin American network to Madrid's bones would own one of the most powerful aviation corridors on Earth. Air Europa's value lay not in its size, but in exactly where it resided. COVID-19 hit, and it hit Air Europa like a sledgehammer. In November 2020, with the airline hemorrhaging cash and on the edge of collapse, the Spanish government stepped in with a €475 million emergency loan. The money saved the airline, but it also chained it. Air Europa was now drowning in government debt, desperate for a partner willing to inject capital and help it pay back Madrid. That's a very specific kind of vulnerability. You have a priceless asset in a strategically critical location, and you need cash, fast. And the family that founded and still controls the airline, the Hidalgos of the Globalia group, has no interest in being bought out. That combination of maximum strategic value, plus maximum financial pressure, plus a proud founding family that absolutely will not sell, is what created the most fascinating bidding war in recent aviation history. Here's where it gets wild. IAG, the owner of British Airways and Iberia, tried first. In 2019, they announced a €1 billion deal to buy Air Europa outright. On paper, it made total sense. Merge Spain's 2 biggest carriers, dominate the Madrid hub, conquer Latin America. Simple. Except it wasn't simple at all. The European Commission, which watches competition across EU markets like a hawk, looked at what a combined Iberia and Air Europa would look like and raised serious alarms. IAG's proposed merger would have created enormous concentration across Air Europa's routes. The regulators demanded IAG hand over a massive chunk of routes to competitors to allow the deal to go through. IAG tried, but the giveaways weren't enough. In August 2024, IAG terminated the agreement and paid a €50 million break fee, as the conditions set by the European Commission proved too complicated to satisfy. €50 million just to walk away. That's got a sting in the morning. Then came Lufthansa and Air France-KLM, separately circling the same prize. Air France-KLM apparently proposed a €300 million investment for a 51% controlling stake, but talks with Globalia ultimately broke down. Lufthansa also pursued discussions before confirming its own withdrawal. Both made the same fatal mistake as IAG, just in a different form. They wanted control. They wanted majority ownership. They wanted to eventually absorb Air Europa into their giant corporate structures and run it from either Frankfurt or Paris. But that was never going to work. The Hidalgos weren't looking for a new parent company. They needed a financial partner, someone who could inject cash, help retire that government debt, but let the family keep running the airline. Every time a big European group showed up demanding the keys, the conversation ended. The bigger the buyer, the bigger the regulatory problem, and the deeper the family's distrust. Europe's three most powerful airline groups all tried, all three failed. The prize sat there on the table seemingly untouchable. So how did Turkish Airlines do what none of them could? Well, here's the point you might miss. Turkish Airlines didn't win by being richer. They didn't win by being bigger. They didn't even win by offering more money. Their winning move was understanding that every previous suitor had been fighting the wrong battle. The key to European aviation is a rule called EU Regulation 1008/2008. It's the law that protects the market from foreign takeovers. To operate as an EU airline, you must be majority owned and effectively controlled by EU nationals. A non-EU entity cannot hold more than 49% and cannot direct the airline's strategy or management. Every European buyer saw the law as the landscape they had to operate within. Turkish Airlines, a non-EU carrier, looked at the exact same law and saw something completely different. They saw a guarantee they could offer that no European rival ever could. Turkish Airlines won the minority stake in Air Europa by accepting shared control of the company with the Hidalgo family, outmanoeuvring Lufthansa and Air France-KLM, both of which were seeking a path to control. The deal was structured as roughly €275 million in convertible debt and €25 million in direct shares, targeting a stake of 25 to 27%. That's deliberately, carefully below every regulatory threshold. And Turkish Airlines publicly stated that they have no current plans to increase their stake beyond the minority position. This wasn't corporate modesty, it was a precisely engineered message aimed directly at the Hidalgo family. Because Turkish Airlines is a non-EU carrier, EU law makes it legally impossible for them to ever take full control of the airline. They can never cross that 49% threshold. They can never dominate the board. They cannot, by law, turn Air Europa into an extension of their empire. That single legal reality gave the Hidalgos the one promise that no European airline could credibly make. Your family will keep running this company. Turkish Airlines used the exact regulation designed to block them to make their deal irresistible. Absolute genius. Here's where the story gets bigger than most people realise. Everyone focused on the money. €300 million, a 26.5% stake in a mid-sized Spanish carrier. Interesting maybe, but not earth-shattering. Except that's not really what Turkish Airlines actually bought. To understand the real play, you have to zoom out and look at the map Turkish Airlines already flies. As of late 2024, Turkish Airlines operated to 352 destinations in 131 countries, the most extensive international network of any airline on Earth. Their hub in Istanbul handles 80% of all departures at one of the world's largest airports. Istanbul sits on the geographic crossroads of Europe and Asia, with over 100 countries and half the world's population within reach of their narrowbody fleet alone. They serve Africa better than any European carrier. They fly to places most Western airlines abandoned or never even bothered with. When other airlines retreated, Turkish stayed. When new routes opened up in Central Asia, East Africa, the Middle East, Turkish was already there. They turned geography into a business model. But for all that extraordinary reach, there was one enormous blind spot: Latin America. As of 2024, Turkish Airlines served 26 destinations in North and South America, actually modest for an airline of their size and global ambition. The continent was the one major gap in their map, and filling that gap through organic growth, building routes slot by slot, year by year, would take a decade and cost far more than €300 million. Air Europa was a shortcut, and Madrid was the secret door. The Istanbul to Madrid corridor becomes the western anchor of an Istanbul to South America bridge. Passengers from Central Asia, East Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe can now connect through Istanbul, cross to Madrid, and reach over a dozen Latin American cities on Air Europa's network without booking two separate tickets on two separate airlines. Turkish Airlines executives explicitly described Air Europa's Latin American network as the main draw for the investment, noting it enables scaled and accelerated growth in the Latin American market as part of its 2033 strategy. This wasn't Spain, this was Turkish Airlines buying a cheat code to a whole continent. Let's pull back even further, because the Air Europa deal didn't happen in isolation. It's the latest expression of a strategy Turkish Airlines has been building for 2 decades. Istanbul's location is genuinely unique in commercial aviation. It sits at the hinge point where Europe becomes Asia, where the Middle East meets Eastern Europe, where Africa is suddenly reachable. Istanbul lies within 4 hours of 1.5 billion people, making it one of the most strategically ideal hub locations on the planet for connecting traffic between continents. That's more or less the same structural advantage the Gulf carriers built their entire empires on. Dubai, Doha, Abu Dhabi, all of them used geography to become connecting machines between the East and the West, until the recent aggression in the region exposed its vulnerability. Turkish Airlines has access to the same logic, an arguably less exposed location, and they acted on it aggressively. They built Istanbul Airport into a mega hub with capacity for 200 million annual passengers. They ordered aircraft at scale, targeting over 800 in their fleet by 2033. Istanbul Airport is now more dominated by a single carrier than Atlanta is by Delta, with Turkish Airlines accounting for nearly 80% of all departures from the facility. And here's the bit that gets fascinating from a geopolitical standpoint. Turkish Airlines operates in a world where instability is a near-permanent feature of the regions they serve. Airlines with narrowly concentrated networks get badly hurt when a war closes an airspace, when a political crisis empties a corridor, or when sanctions reshape travel patterns. Turkish Airlines, by building the most geographically diversified network in the world, insulated themselves against exactly that kind of shock. When other carriers had to reroute or pull back from certain regions, Turkish always adapted faster. When certain European carriers lost Russian traffic after 2022, Turkish saw some of that demand redirect through Istanbul. Geography as a business model means your risk is spread across so many corridors and regions that no single disruption can break you. It means that when the map reshuffles, as it always eventually does in aviation, you're almost always sitting in an advantageous position. Airlines with diversified networks across the world can adapt to changing conditions more quickly than those locked into a handful of routes. The Air Europa deal is the latest extension of that logic, taking Turkish into the one continent where they had always been underweight. The Spanish government officially approved Turkish Airlines purchasing a 26.5% stake in Air Europa for €300 million on the 4th of June 2026. That deal values Air Europa at approximately €1.175 billion. The transaction is expected to be finalised later in the year, pending final EU regulatory approvals, including review under the bloc's foreign subsidies regulation. And what it leaves behind is seriously messy for everyone else in the industry. Air Europa is a member of the SkyTeam Alliance. Turkish Airlines is a cornerstone of the rival Star Alliance. IAG, which is still sitting on its 20% stake and likely deeply regretting it, belongs to oneworld. You now have a single airline where representatives of all three major global alliances have a seat at the table. The rigid alliance structure that has defined aviation partnerships for decades may have accidentally just been significantly muddied. For IAG, the position is almost painfully awkward. Their 20% stake, once a down payment on a full takeover, is now a minority position in an airline they won't control, partially owned by a rival they'll have to compete with for Latin American traffic. They paid €100 million to get in the door, and €50 million to fail to get more. And now Turkish Airlines, for €300 million, has the partnership they could never secure. Lufthansa and Air France-KLM have already pivoted their attention to TAP in Portugal, which similarly combines Latin American exposure with privatisation potential and a proud national identity. But the biggest implication of this deal isn't what it does to the current players, it's the template it creates for everyone watching from outside Europe. The traditional route for a non-EU airline wanting a foothold in Europe was full acquisition. That was always going to hit a wall though. EU ownership rules make majority control by non-EU entities legally impossible. But Turkish Airlines just demonstrated something powerful. You don't need majority control to extract massive strategic value. A minority stake, structured correctly, with convertible debt that provides the target with the cash it urgently needs, framed as a partnership rather than a takeover, offered to owners who need capital and not a new boss. Now that's a viable path into the most protected aviation market in the world. Turkish Airlines' plan succeeded precisely because it was a minority investment and not a full takeover, which allowed it to avoid the competition concerns that had blocked every previous attempt. Gulf carriers have been circling Europe for years, constrained by the same regulatory walls. Asian carriers with global ambitions have similar limitations. If they were paying attention to this deal, they now have a blueprint. Find an airline with strategic assets and financial pressure, offer capital without demanding control, use the rules as a feature, not a barrier. The fortress wall around European aviation has a secret side door, and Turkish Airlines just found it. People looked at this deal and saw 300 million euros going from Istanbul to Madrid. But that's not what happened. What actually happened is that Turkish Airlines spent years creating the most geographically flexible airline in the world. One that could adapt when others couldn't, connect where others wouldn't, and one that could operate in conditions that would have grounded a lesser carrier. They built a network so diverse, with a hub so strategically placed, that the only logical next move was to create a bridge to the one continent they don't yet serve at scale. Then they found an airline with the right kind of assets, in the right kind of financial condition, and with the right kind of family as owners. And they offered the one thing that no European carrier had thought to offer. Rather than a takeover, a partnership. One that the law itself guarantees would have to stay as a partnership. Sometimes the smartest takeover is not even a takeover at all. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my little channel. Every view, like, share and comment, it all helps me to grow and to improve the quality, so I'm truly grateful. Thank you.